like chairs? More importantly, do you like tiny chairs? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you answered yes to the question, do you like chairs, then you're going to be very excited about this video. I'm going to be making 2 chairs for Shira of Queen City Minis. This is a collaboration video. She is going to be making something for my Fairfield project, which is this little house in the background here, and I'm going to be making something for her upcoming project, which will be the Gryffindor common room. That's why I'm wearing my scarf. This is the most Gryffindor thing I have. She sent me a reference photo of the common room with a few chairs she was interested in and asked me to make 1. Well, I have decided to make 2, which is why this video is probably pretty long. But they're very different chairs with different techniques, so I hope you'll enjoy the video, and if you're thinking about upholstering something, I hope it'll be helpful for you. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to be opening the box from Shira and seeing the miniature she made me. I don't know what she made yet. So let's get started. The first thing I did was sketch out my idea of how each of these chairs are going to be made. A lot of times when it comes to upholstery, having a plan is a good idea. The red chair is going to be a little bit more complicated than the leather chair, but I'm excited to get started on them both. While I'm working, I'm going to make sure to have a 1/12 scale figure nearby, and then also another chair that I've created previously that I know is in 1/12 scale. This is my mini Aira doll that was made by Misfit Doll Co., and she's very helpful when it comes to making sure I keep things in scale. The first thing I'm going to do is sketch out the shapes I have in my notebook and try to keep them about the same size as the chair I'm using for reference. Then I can cut them out of cardboard. One thing I do plan to do is make some of these chairs into kits in the future. However, I'm way behind on kits I already need to make, so mostly what I'm doing is sketching these out on a piece of paper so I can come back to it later when I have more time. Whether you make kits or not, I highly suggest doing this when you build something new because it's always great to have a pattern of something you already built if you plan to build it again in the future or want to share it with someone. Once I have the pieces cut out and traced, I can start building the back of the chair. I'm sandwiching 2 smaller pieces of cardboard in between the larger pieces to give some width to the back of the chair. In order to add the seat onto the back, I'm first going to trace out where I need to cut a notch. I have a notch in the back of the chair, and so I need to include this in the seat. Once I have that complete, I can add the back of the chair into the notch, and then I am just going to trace where I think that the seat of the chair needs to go. This is how it's looking so far, but the shape does change slightly as I continue to design this chair. I cut out 2 of these, and now I'm going to use a long strip of cardboard, cut that into pieces, and cover up the edges. This is going to give some width to the seat of my chair. I'm gluing this all together with hot glue so I can get the design down quickly. However, when I do create the final chair, I do like to add some tacky glue here and there because that holds over a long period of time. Since I like how the back and the seat are looking together, I can go ahead and glue them together permanently, and then I can start working on the arms of the chair. I do make sure to continue to check with my doll every step of the way, making sure I am staying in scale. To create the shape of the arms, I'm going to be using a series of similar shaped pieces that are going to be glued along the edge of the chair that eventually I can cover with cardstock to create the correct shape. So here I'm just checking that it looks right and will work with the arch of the back of the chair. Once I have all the pieces cut out, I can check it with how the chair is looking. The one in the front is going to be leaned back so it matches the design of the chair in my reference. This is how it's looking so far. I did have to figure out a way to connect them together, so I made a little piece from some chipboard or cereal box material that I will be laser cutting so that I have 2 arms that look exactly the same. This is as far as I got with my first attempt at the design. I made sure again to trace everything down, and then I did transfer it into the computer because I do want to make this a kit in the future, and I wanted to make the chair again and make sure that my arms matched, so I just went ahead and put it into the computer. But this is still possible to cut by hand, so that's why I showed the process of how I designed it first. Now I'm going to follow the same exact steps that I already showed you, however now I have done it with the laser cut pieces. I could tell that there was quite a gap between the side of the back and the arms, so I decided to do a little bit of redesigning and build the chair again. I made the back a little bit wider because it is a bit more square or rectangular in the back than I had originally drawn it out to be. But I did try my best and I ended up making quite a few samples, as you can see here. But in the end, this is the one I felt was the closest to the shape that I wanted. It looked good with Mini Aira the doll, and I was ready to get started on creating the final look. So I laser cut it again, and as you can see on the first one, I went ahead and added legs to make sure I liked that as well. But now I can officially start upholstering the chair. So I'm starting with the back and the seat put together the same way as I showed you in the beginning, and then I'm going to begin upholstering the sides of the back of the chair. This is quilt batting. You can buy it for different size quilts. I have had a bag of quilt batting for quite a long time. It will last you a while in miniature, and it's great for slowly building up thicknesses and being able to control it really well without having to use any kind of stuffing. Once I had the sides complete, I could go ahead and start building up some of the cushioning. As you can see, it does kind of look like a toilet, and from this point, all I can see it is a toilet shape. But thankfully, it doesn't stay looking like this for long, especially when I start adding the reddish purple fabric. Covering up the white definitely helps with the toilet look. To start adding on this velvety fabric, I am first laying down a line of hot glue in the back. This is going to take hold of the fabric so that I don't have to worry about pulling it out of the glue when I start pulling on it to upholster the seat. Everything else is going to be glued with some Fabrifix glue. Now that it's glued in place with the hot glue, I can pull on it because it is a bit stretchy, and this is going to allow me to stretch it over the upholstery that I previously added. I'm trying my best not to add too much Fabrifix glue because it can seep through the fabric and then make it just kind of make a mark on the front of it, and this is a really nice velvety fabric, so I don't want that to happen. I will have to age it in the end because it's looking a little bit too nice and new, but for now I want to make sure I keep it as spick and span as possible. Once it's glued down, I'm using some sharp scissors to cut away the edge. It was kind of hard to figure out how to do the edges, but everything in upholstery is really just about hiding the edge of the fabric. As long as you can do that, you can upholster anything. I followed the same process with the back of the chair and just kept pulling at the fabric until it was tight over the top of the quilt batting. Then again, I cut away the fabric so that I had the back of the chair upholstered. Now we have a velvety purple toilet. One really unique factor about this chair in the reference is that it looks like it's covered in all sorts of rugs. Makes me wonder if there was some kind of magic rug or magic carpet reference to where like maybe these were magic carpets that got turned into a chair. You just never really know. But I do not have a rug that matches the one in the reference, and I think printing it wouldn't look as good as it could if it was an actual rug type fabric. But I found this in my collection and it has a lot of red in it, which is very prominent in the Gryffindor common room. And so I'm going to try and use this. I think it looks like a rug and it even has this edging on the side of it that looks just like the fringe on the edge of a rug. So I cut off a piece of that, and then I'm going to cut along the straight lines of the rug and add that so it looks like the fringe is on the end of it. Now when I'm adding this on, I am adding quite a bit of Fabrifix glue to the back. This is going to fray check the edges of the rug, so hopefully in the future it will not come unraveled. Now that that's drying, I'm going to work on the arms. These were put together with those little bits of chipboard that I showed you previously, and now I'm going to wrap them with some cardstock. This is going to make them more solid, so when I start the upholstery process, I have something to glue all of the fabric to. I'm now going to call this section of the video wrapping things around the cardboard arms because that's all I'm going to be doing for the next several steps. First, I'm wrapping the cardstock, and then I'm going to carefully cut around the cardboard so that it's even. And of course, I had to check the fit, and I did feel like it fit with the side of the chair really well, so all of those practice chairs I made in the beginning were definitely worth it. So now I'm going to use some Fabrifix glue on top of the cardstock and wrap the quilt batting around the arm. I only want one layer of this because this is going to start to bulk up really quickly. So I'm doing the same process that I did with the cardstock, except I am going to cover the front and back of the arm so that those have a little bit of upholstery as well. Again, I'm checking to make sure it fits, and just with the layer of quilt batting, you can see how it's starting to thicken up really quickly. Before I cover the entire thing in the velvety material, I'm first going to cover the two ends, and I'm going to press this material against the side of the quilt batting. I'm adding a few snips into the fabric so that it will fold down really easily and be flat. This is going to upholster the front and back of the arm first before I add the entire wrap around the sides like I've done before. Again, I'm being very careful with how much Fabrifix glue I put on. I do put some on the edge of the velvety material that I previously laid down and then wrap the larger part around it. I am making sure that the edge of where the velvet material ends is going to be covered up by the edge of the chair when I glue everything together. As I said, the big part of upholstery is just making sure you can hide the seams once you're done. So here is one big thick arm for the edge of the chair, and I made the other one just the same way. The last thing we need to do before gluing this big chunky arm onto the chair is to add one more piece of this rug. I'm following the same steps where I cut along the lines and then put quite a bit of glue so that it fray checks the sides. Again, I'm making sure that the seam will be covered up whenever it's glued onto the chair. Now that I have both arms finished, I can add quite a bit of hot glue so that it takes hold very quickly, and I'm going to squish the body and the arm together until that takes hold. This is a very important step to be patient on because if I don't hold the chair tight together before the glue cools, it could come apart later. Here's a comparison between the thickness of the upholstered chair next to its cardboard skeleton. As you can see, the upholstery adds quite a bit. Now that it's done, I'm going to trace out a bottom piece made of cardboard. This is going to again attach these pieces together, give it a little bit more strength to stay together over the years, and I'm going to glue that in place. You will see there's a little gap, but that's okay. I'm adding 2 of these to make sure I get the chair to the correct height that I'm looking for. The next step is to cover the back of the chair. To do this, I am tracing out the back of the chair in some cardstock, which I am going to be upholstering. I'm cutting that out and double checking that it looks right against the back of the chair. I decided because I had already upholstered the back of the arms, I didn't need those pieces, so I cut those out, and I'm just going to be upholstering this kind of hourglass shape that's going to cover all of my work on the back and cover up the cardboard. This was an easy enough process by just gluing the fabric to the cardstock, folding it over the edge, and then around the rounded areas I snipped into the fabric and then slowly glued those down until they were smooth. Once that was dry, I had a very nice looking upholstery piece that I could put on the back of the chair and cover everything up. I think it looks pretty professional, honestly. Now that the back was on, I could add some trim around the lower part of the chair. This is basically going to be the same process, except I am going to be cutting along the edge of the cardstock. Originally I was going to fold it over, but I was afraid that would make it too thick, so I just cut off the excess fabric because eventually I am going to be adding some thread trim around all of those edges. Before gluing it to the chair, I am going to put some of that fringe that I previously put on the rug type piece that I keep adding all over the chair, making sure that all of the pieces are kind of feathered out and nothing got stuck in the glue. And now it can be permanently upholstered to the chair. I'm using Fabrifix glue and pushing it down into place, making sure it goes along with the form. Once that's all done, I can move on to the thread trim, or piping as some people might call it, on some upholstery. And this is just going to be carefully glued along the top edge of this piece that I glued down. This is going to cover up the white edge of the cardstock, and it's just going to make the chair look a lot nicer. I'm going around the entire bottom piece that I just added on. And I'm going to add the same color thread just underneath the rug piece I added to the seat area, and that's going to cover up the rough edge of the rug. There's a few other places I need to add the thread, but first I need to add the rug I'm going to call it the rug toupee that needs to be thrown over the top of the chair. So as you can see, I left this in because I'm hesitating quite a bit before doing this. I laid down glue and I'm still just trying to figure out the best way to add this piece. It flops over the top of the chair in the original reference, so I added some of the velvety fabric, and then I cut some more of the rug that was a similar pattern. I tried to line it up as best as I could. I glued it so that I knew the pattern would line up, and then I flipped the velvety material over the top and allowed the glue to glue those two pieces together. Once that's done, I could flip it back over and start cutting down the pieces that were too long. I also wanted to make sure to add a little bit more of that fringe on the edge of the rug so that it did hang down the back of the chair. The edges of the fabric are still a little bit rough, as you will see, but I will address those in a bit. First, I wanted to make sure that I had something that would work for the feet of the chair, and initially I put these beads together, so I had 2 beads put together in the front and 2 in the back so it would tilt back a little bit. And this was just way too tall. When I put Mini Aira into the chair, her feet were way off the floor, so I decided to keep this a very low chair. So I have 2 beads in the front, and in the back I didn't want the fringe to be crushed against the ground, so I just took one of these bamboo skewers and glued that on instead. So it does have a place to rest. It's pretty much sitting flat on the floor in the back of the chair, but there is a little bit of space so that the fringe just isn't absolutely crushed. The next step that I had to tackle is something I had never done before, so I decided to do a few tests. There are these little gathered bits on the front area of the arms on the original chair. I did not know how to make them, and I did not want to experiment straight onto the chair I had just worked so hard on, so I set up this little sample board to try and get the effect. So the first thing I tried was just cutting a circle, gluing it down, and then I tried to twist the center to get an easy bit of wrinkles in the middle of the fabric. Now this may just be the type of fabric. This could have very easily worked with cotton fabric, but this is more of a elastic fabric, and it just wasn't working. I tried it with a couple different types of glue. I tried tacky glue, and then I tried Fabrifix, but it just wasn't looking how I wanted it to look. So in the end, I decided to do it the hard, more time tedious way, but I knew it was going to look the best in the end. So I decided to use a needle and thread and gather the material up and then pull it tight so it's kind of a yo-yo effect, and then glue it down. So this is going to give me that gathered look that I'm going for. Now that I know the technique I want to use, I can make several of these. I'm going to need 2 for the front arms of the chair, and I'm going to need 2 for the back sides of the seat. They are going to have to be slightly different sizes to make sure I can cover up all the edges and make sure that it looks good. So I did sit there and make a few to make sure I had what I needed, and I kept putting them on the chair, so at this moment it kind of looked like the chair was trying to hypnotize me a little bit. But I got them done and could start gluing them on. I'm using hot glue initially just in the very center of the rosette or the yo-yo, I'm not quite sure what to call it, just so I know that I'm getting it into place. Then I can use my scissors and carefully cut them down if I feel like they're a little bit too big for the area. I'm using Fabrifix to go around the back side. I probably should have used a toothpick to do this because the nozzle was rather large, but once the glue was back there, I could gently push the little rosette. I'm just going to call it a rosette. I'm going to gently push the rosette in place and allowed the glue to dry. I did this for the top back of the seat as well. Once it was done, I added some more of the thread trim around the outside, and it has this interesting design at the front, so I made sure to add that as well. This chair honestly taught me so many new upholstery techniques, and by teaching me, it just kind of like I had to figure things out as I went along, but I'm very happy with it. It's not exactly like it looks in the movie, but I think it's a pretty unique chair on its own right, and I really hope that Shira likes it. Here's Mini Aira relaxing in the chair. It's quite a big boy. There's lots of room to lounge, but that's the fun thing about chairs is they come in all shapes and sizes. So now the scary part, I had to figure out how to age it to look like it's been sitting in a castle that's thousands of years old, possibly. The fabric is just too bright, shiny, and new, so I had to dull it down. I added some light brown paint to some water, and then I also put a little bit of Mod Podge in there, not too much, but I need to matte the fabric down. The fibers of the velvety fabric need to be matted down because you have, years of wizards just, hanging out on this chair, adding grime to it. I did a little experiment on my experiment board that I made earlier. I just wanted to make sure that if I did this, when it dried, it was going to look how I wanted it to look. And of course, even though I did the experiment, I'm starting on the back of the chair in case something goes very wrong. Every time I dip my brush, I'm making sure that I'm just getting the mixture of the brown paint, water, and Mod Podge, and I'm not picking up any extra brown paint because that would look not too nice on our chair. Even though we want it to be old, we don't want any brown streaks on a chair. Gross. So now I can let it set in front of the fan for quite a while. I want to make sure it dries completely. I don't want anything molding underneath this fabric, and it did dry really nice. I think it still has that nice sheen, but it looks a lot more matted down, like it may have been sitting in a castle for quite a while. I'm now just going to paint the bottom part of the chair. I know it's kind of underwhelming underneath the chair, but it is kind of hidden away underneath the fringe, so I painted that with some brown acrylic paint. And as always, if I make something for somebody, I like to sign the bottom of it. I just think that makes it really fun. So this chair is done. Let's move on to the next one. It's about halfway through the video. I've made one chair. We're about to make the next one, but first I have to make an announcement. Bentley House Mini shirts are back. They are available on my website, bentleyhouseminis.com. And as requested, I have made several different references to different scales. They all have the same pattern. They say, not to brag, but my vacation home is 1/12 scale, or you can get it in 1/24 scale, 1/48 scale, or 1/6 scale. Sorry, I have to stand on my toes for you to see it. So be sure to check it out if you're one of those people who were sad they missed them the first time around. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into making the second chair. This chair is going to be a completely different process, totally different materials. Well, except for the cardboard. I found this pleather material, and I think this will work great for the leather effect. And of course, we need some peanut butter Captain Crunch. Just kidding, not the cereal. We need the cereal box material, and happy birthday, Captain Crunch. We eat a lot of that around here. I'm first going to sketch my idea out on the cardboard. This one I'm starting pretty similar to the way I did the last one. I'm just drawing out my shapes and trying to figure out what I want it to look like. I made 3 seat shapes and glued them together with hot glue. Now I'm going to cut off a piece from this cereal box, and I'm just going to curve the entire back of the chair around the seat. If you ever work with cereal boxes, I highly suggest you sand the waxy side of the cereal box, or the side that has the print. That will make everything stick to it a lot better, including glue and paint. I wrapped the cereal box around the seat, and now I'm just looking at my reference and drawing out where I want the sides and the back to be. The sides and the back of this chair are really, really thin, so that's why I'm using this material instead of cardboard. Once I have that traced out, I can remove it. It's pretty easy to pull hot glue off, so that's one thing I like about it. I can remove it. I folded the cereal box in half, and then I cut out the shape that I had traced. Once that's done, I can check it again with my chair and make sure that I like how it's looking. I felt like the arms of the chair were still a little bit too high in comparison to my reference, so I cut it down. I also decided it wasn't wide enough, so I did the same exact steps I already showed you and cut out a second chair that's just a little bit bigger. Once I have the seat and the back glued together, I want to reinforce the sides. As I said, they're going to be pretty thin, but I do want them to be strong. So I am going to double up the cereal box material on the sides. All I did was trace it, cut it out, and glue it on. Also, the addition of the tacky glue is going to strengthen it as well. Now that the sides are complete, I can start tracing out what I'm going to need to cut from the pleather to cover the back. To do this, I'm rolling my chair really carefully along this material. I do suggest cutting just a little bit more than you need so that you know that you will have cut it right the first time. Then I'm going to practice wrap it around the back before gluing it in place. As you can tell, I left a little extra on one side. This is going to help me cut it very closely to the edge. This is going to have to be a very precisely cut and upholstered chair just to get the effect that we're going for. Once I'm happy with the fit, I can use some tacky glue to glue this piece down. I find tacky glue to be very strong, and it also doesn't make any marks on the faux leather like I'm sure Fabrifix would do. Sometimes it just kind of marks the front because it is an acetone-based glue. Before I upholster the interior of the chair, I am going to add a little bit of cushioning. Not too much because these chairs have been sat on for many, many years. For the cushioning, I'm just using some quilt batting like I did on the previous chair. Once it's glued in place, I can stretch the pleather on top of it, and I'm going to use hot glue so that I can stick this down really quickly and hold it in place. I'm going to first stick down the bottom layer of the material, and then I'm going to slowly go around the sides and push it into place. When I got around to gluing the sides, I used a pencil to push it into place, and you may already be able to tell, but I did do this off center, and this is going to be a problem in the future, which you will see. But to finish off the back, I just added some glue to the top and pushed that into place as well. Now you can see how it's off center. One side is way longer than the other side, and it's not quite getting to the end of the arm. So instead of ripping everything up, I decided to try and make a clean cut in the pleather and replace it with another piece. I do hope in the future I will be able to cover this up with some pillows, and thankfully this material does not fray, so I don't have to worry about that. I pushed it up as close as I could to the original cut, and I do think it is a little bit difficult to see, so I'm happy with that fit and continuing on with upholstering the chair. Just like I was doing with the first chair, I am copying down each piece, and this is a great way to just remember the way that you made the chair in case you want to do it again in the future. Now that the entire back of the chair is upholstered, I need to work on the lower base. This is not the seat of the chair, but it's going to be the piece that goes underneath the seat. So I'm starting with a shape that fits perfectly inside, and then I'm going to pull this tight over the front edge of the chair. I made it a little bit longer than I needed, so it's easy to pull down, and I make sure I have enough to cover the entire area. This fabric does have a little bit of a stretch, not too much, but just enough for me to stretch it over the front. Then I'm going to cut it a bit shorter, and then I can glue it down to the cardboard underneath so that I have a nice edge. I did put one little snip in the center so that it would lay down flat and look nice. Figuring out how to upholster the seat of the chair was a little difficult because I wanted to wrap the entire seat in one piece so that it had a really nice edge, but with this fabric it just wasn't going to work. So my hope is that I can at least cover the top and the bottom and then fold down the front edges, and that will give it a nice finish. Luckily, this is a very flat and worn piece, as you can see here, and it is covered mostly by a pillow, so I'm not too worried about getting it absolutely perfect, but I am trying to do my best, especially since this is going off to another miniaturist that will be using it in a miniature scene. I glued down the cardboard side first and then folded it over, and I'm using my hot glue gun just like I did on the back of the chair. I'm going to be doing something similar and then just pushing this piece completely flat. Before I do that, I am going to be working on the edges. Even though I did that rounded cut, I decided that I really just needed a squared off piece, so I'm cutting off the additional pieces that I don't need. And I'm just making this up. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get something that looks okay. I pushed down the side pieces first and then added some more hot glue on the inside. Then putting it flat on my desk, I pressed it down so that I had a finished edge. The corner doesn't look fantastic, but I do come up with a process later in this video that kind of conceals that so you cannot tell. Once I was happy with how everything was pressed together, I could glue it in place as the seat of the chair. While the seat dries in place, I can work on the edges that are exposed. To cover the edges, I'm going to cut very thin strips of the pleather material. This is going to be glued along the top and the sides of the arms. I'm first adding the very center and then allowing that to dry. Then I can add more glue and force it to turn around the corner. I needed to make sure the center was completely dry first and secure before I forced it to turn. Now I can use some straight thin strips to go over the top of the arm as well. This is going to completely cover the chair. However, when it was done, I realized I wasn't happy with the look of the edges. This is just part of the fabric. It has this white that you can see at the very edge of it, and I wanted to cover it up. So I did some experiments with some blue fabric paint that I had to see if this is something that would work on the edge of this material. And the blue doesn't look great, but I did feel like it worked really well to cover up the edges and cover any mistakes. So I went ahead and got some brown fabric paint. I could have painted on top of the blue, however, I was afraid that if it got scratched in any way, which I will have to sand the fabric paint, that the blue would show through. I'm sanding it because the fabric paint is very, very glossy and it doesn't look great against the leather. So my plan is to fill in all of these gaps with the brown fabric paint. Another good reason to use fabric paint is it is better at moving with the seams. So because the pleather material is a little bit squishy, if someone does move it around quite a bit or handle it, the fabric paint will hold up much better than the acrylic paint. Here's how it's looking once I applied it to the top edge. I'm going to continue adding it all around the edge until they are covered. Already, I think it's looking so much better. However, I don't like the glossiness, so I need to go back and sand that in a very detailed manner to get into all the crevices. This is also how I covered up the edges of the cushion so that it looked a little bit better than me just folding in the sides. Even after sanding, there is a little bit of shine that is left over, but not to fear because I need to do some aging on the edges. As you can see, this is a very old leather chair. It's been beat up and you can see some of that happening around the edges. To get this effect, I'm going to be using some orange and light brown acrylic paint. This is just going to be dabbed onto the very edge of the chair, and I'm also using my finger to kind of fuzz it out. I don't want it to look like brush strokes. I do want it to look as though someone's been kind of brushing up against the chair and slowly removing that top layer of leather. I'm doing the orange first because it is going to be the most intense color, and then I'm going to go back with some light brown and hit some more of the edges here and there. This was a really fun process. I'm not sure I've ever aged anything like this before where it was a leather chair, and so I had a lot of fun looking at the reference and trying to get the aging just right. So here's how it's looking after the aging process. I do really like the effect, and it does look like I've eaten Cheetos while working on this. We're going to move on to the rivets. In the reference, the rivets for this chair are extremely tiny. So instead of trying to replicate that exactly, I'm just going to make a hint to the reference by using these diamond painting drills, and I'm just going to add a few of them here and there and then paint them so you do get the idea that this is a leather chair that has used rivets to put it together, but it's not going to be exactly just like the one in the movie reference. These are the same diamond painting drills that I've used all over the captain's quarters. My daughter finished this diamond painting years ago and gave me the bag, and they have just lasted for so many projects. I specifically pulled out all of the dark diamond drills, so the black and the dark blue, so that if they ever did chip or the paint came off of the edges of them, you would still have a dark color underneath. Now I'm going over them with some silver, and then I did a little bit of antique copper. And finally, I'm aging them with some watered down black acrylic paint, just so it looks like some dirt and grime has gone around the edges over time. I had some leftover 3D printed legs from an experiment I was doing on my 3D printer, and these are going to be perfect for the legs of the chair. They are a little bit too long, so I'm using some flush cutters. I always tend to hear that people don't hear me say that correct. It's flush, like flush the toilet. Flush cutters. And I'm going to cut them down and then create a hole in the bottom of the chair with a sharp pair of scissors. This is going to allow me to insert the leg and glue it in place. Once that's done, I can go ahead and paint the legs with some brown acrylic paint, and I can also paint the cardboard that is the underside of the chair. I am also going to sign this one. Of course, I have to age up the legs to match the age of the rest of the chair, and then we can move on to creating the pillows. The leather chair definitely needs some pillows, and I'm going to create one for the upholstered armchair as well. So here's the colors that I chose from my fabric collection. Of course, I need to make one that does look like the purplish velvety material as well. I'm first measuring out how big the pillow needs to be, and I'm just using a square to try and cut my fabric as square as possible. The pillow in the reference does have matching trim, however, I want to match the trim of this pillow in the leather chair to match the trim I've used all over the armchair. This is going to give them some cohesiveness as pieces that should go together. So the first thing I'm doing is hemming all the edges of one side of the pillow, and then I'm going to slowly add glue and add the trim around the edge, and this is just going to look like this. So this is the easiest way I could figure out how to do it without getting out my sewing machine, which honestly sewing it probably would have been easier, but this is the way I'm going with. I added the trim first and then added some quilt batting because this is a very, again, smashed down pillow, so it doesn't have to look too full. Then I can use my clover iron to glue down the top side of the pillow, and this smashes the trim in between. I do want to add some little tassels to each one of the corners, so I picked a thread that I thought would work. I tied it together and just cut it so that the tassel showed up at the bottom, and I'm just going to sew it through. I don't know if I explained that very well, but it's pretty easy to make tassels in miniature. You just kind of have to fold the thread over and over again, make a knot, and then cut off the loops. It did take a little bit to get the thread through the very thick glued pillow, but once I did, I could tie it in place, and then I had a little tassel on one corner. I'm only going to add it to the two front corners because the back side of this pillow is going to be covered. I'm going to make this one out of the velvety material again so it matches with the armchair and the two look like they go together. I'm just going to be doing this the very plain way of making a pillow where you put the three edges together, and then I'm going to stuff it with some leftover quilt batting that I just chopped up into little pieces. Once that's full enough, I'm going to fold in that fourth edge and glue that together as well. Here is how the two pillows look for the leather chair. I'm pretty happy with the results. And then I followed the same exact very simple steps for the red pillow that's going to go on the armchair. I just glued the 3 sides, flipped it inside out, stuffed it, and then glued the last edge together so that I had this little red pillow. I'm trying to keep it pretty simple since the patterns are more complex on the chair. However, Shira can definitely change that up if she wants to. I did not want to glue these down, and in fact I came up with a way that the pillows on the leather chair could still look slouchy and be permanently attached, but also removable from the chair itself. So I cut out a piece of cardstock and then I glued the pillows into the chair while the cardstock was in there. There is no glue on the part of the cardstock that touches the chair. However, these pillows will be permanently attached to each other. The reason I'm doing this is I want them to sit in the chair correctly and look slouchy and like they've been there for years and years. And if I did not connect them, they could slowly slide out and not look right. But now Shira can take it out of the chair, redo the pillows, or she can leave them in there and they will look correct once they are sitting in the chair. So here are my 2 finished chairs. I put them in the captain's quarters because I thought the reds would look really good in there. And I of course had to put mini Aira in one of the chairs so that you could see the scale. You will have to go over to Shira's video to see her open them, and hopefully, I'm not sure, but I hope she put her reaction in there on if she liked them or not. And of course, Mini Aira had to convince the captain that no, you cannot keep the chairs. You have a lot of stuff coming in the next couple months, but the chairs are going onto another channel. So now let's pack the package for Shira. I am going to, of course, be including the 2 chairs. I also wanted to include some of the extra fabric because there are so many other textures and things that need to be added to make the Gryffindor common room come alive. So all I had left was this little bitty trim. That's all the trim that's left. So I wanted to send that. And then I also found this little bench in my collection that kind of looks like the bench that's near the fire. So I decided to add that as well. There are plenty of framed images in the Gryffindor common room, so I'm sending some of my 3D printed frames. It's all packaged up and ready to go on its way. I'm going to make sure it's all cushioned, and I put in a note, so make sure you go over to Shira's channel to see her open this up. It's a few days later and the package from Queen City Minis has arrived, so let's open it up. There's arrows pointing to this side, so I'm hoping this is the end I need to open. Okay, I have a letter that I'm going to read first. In the letter is tucked this little Afghan that was made by Tiff Snyder on Etsy, and she said she was great to work with, so I'm wondering if she made this specifically for the Fairfield. So that is so amazing. Thank you, Shira. Okay, let's get into what Shira made, which she says is her first half-scale minis. Oh my gosh, I can already see them. That is so cool. And if you don't know, the Fairfield is all 70s themed, so that's why you're going to see a lot of 70s colors. And I am so excited to put these into the project. Look at these little plants. I will put Shira's plant video up where she made these. So cute. Oh my gosh, look at this little bean bag. That's gonna be so perfect for the teenagers' room. Ah, she signed it too. Here's another bean bag, different shape. There's so many little things. Oh my goodness. Look at all these books. Okay, so there's a little lava lamp, cups, a teapot, and a little bowl of fruit. This is going to be so perfect on the barrel table set that I have. Oh my gosh, so 70s. Can you believe how many books? So this little set of books has some glasses on top. This looks like a little Zen garden. And then this is like a little flower shadow box that can go on the wall. Like you can see these fit on the tips of my fingers. That is how tiny they are. We've got another little plant and then a lamp. This might be a little dog bowl, maybe, because the family does have a dog. That's so cute. The green is perfect. Here are some wall hangings. This little macrame piece, and these look like little baskets. Oh my gosh, they all come out. How cool. I did not realize my skeleton family had such a green thumb on their bony little hands, but this is going to be such a lively project, except for the skeleton family that lives in my Fairfield. But how beautiful. I don't know if you could tell, but these are little planters that hang on the wall. So those will be perfect, maybe out on the porch. And the final bag looks like it has some metal miniatures in it. A little box of tissues, a bag, a banjo, little teapots, tiny, tiny little bear. Adorable. Oh, I almost forgot this little box. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Look at these tiny tables. These are so cute, and she signed these as well. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have to put things into the Fairfield right now so we can see these in place. They're so cool. And before I put everything into the Fairfield, I just want to say a big thank you, Shira. I cannot believe you made all of these teeny tiny miniatures. Half scale is so difficult for me, and you just totally rocked it, and I cannot wait to put these into the Fairfield. I am so inspired. Sometimes I lose my inspiration on this project, but I have to see these in the house right now. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to check out Shira's video. I will have it linked down below. You can see the items that she made for me, and you'll be able to see her open the package and see the chairs that I made for her. She has an amazing channel full of all sorts of really cool tutorials. She's an amazing artist, so please be sure to check her out. Put my scarf back on for the ending. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Talking. Do you like chairs? Do you like chairs? Shush. Do you like chairs? Do you? Do you? Do you like tiny chairs? Do you like chairs? Yes, I know you like the couch. You love the couch. I think that's it.